first question for you is going to be at the top of this draft. I don't think it's littered with blue chip talent. I don't think it's a top heavy draft, but I think it's a really nice draft. We're finding a bunch of guys that can help your team. What do you view as the perfect scenario for how things would work out for the Dallas Cowboys when you get to pick number 12? What do they hope happens in the top 11?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, look, the best case scenario is, Ty Simpson or, a quarterback goes higher than we expect, right? That bumps another player down. I think that everybody hopes that you get the safety Caleb Downs from Ohio State falls down to number 12.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one where it's all right. This is a great player, clear cut, the best player at his individual position, but then also one of the best like individual talents in the draft falls to number 12 because of positional value, which is, I think it's a good argument to make. But what I would say is that in this class where if you're picking 3, if you're picking 5, you're going to kind of hold your nose a little bit for the player because the number 3 pick in 2026 does not equal the number 3 pick in 2027, does not equal the number 3 pick in 2023 or 2021, right? It's just the talent at the very tippy top of this draft. It doesn't match it from last year. Like, I don't think there's a player that you would compare to Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter from a pure talent level in this class. So I do think if you're picking at the very top, our friends out at PHNX, they're going to be hurt a little bit when it comes to this. But I think with the Cowboys at 12, you're right in that sweet spot where it starts to level out a little bit, where it's, all right, the guy that's going to go 12th overall, that's probably a player that we would talk about going 12th overall in a typical draft. But then there's that opportunity where a Caleb Downs could fall into that spot because of positional value. That would be best case scenario.
Fran, what is the heavy position in this draft, right? When you look at kind of across the board, is it line, defensive line, offensive line, receiver, and what is that position? And then at what point will we see a run at that particular position? Will it be kind of around that 12, around 15, 16, late 20s? With that strong position.
Yeah, I think that when you look at this group overall, and again, keeping in mind that it's like the very, very top isn't great at any of these spots. So it's more like, all right, when we're looking at first round, we're looking at top 50. What are the positions where you're going to get some good quality players? I look at offensive tackle. I look at pass rusher. I like this cornerback class. I would say those are linebacker is pretty good, depending on how you view Arvell Reese. If he's an edge, then he's with that first group I mentioned. If he's linebacker, then it makes that group really, really strong. I think that those are probably the strengths of this group. Look, at the end of the day, there's always receivers. We know that. There's always going to be receivers available. It's not a great running back draft. Jeremiah Love is at the top there, and obviously is a great player. But after that, I think there's a kind of a big tier drop-off. And then after that, there's even another steep drop-off. So it's not a great overall group for running back. But I think when you look at that's probably the strength of this draft is you look at edge rusher, corner, offensive tackle. Those would be the ones I would look at first.
Fran, I got a couple of questions, but number one, there's a lot of talk about Caleb Downs being the best safety ever. And that includes Ed Reed and our boy from Miami that passed away, Sean Taylor.
Yeah.
Is that what you're seeing?
So I remember watching Sean Taylor. I was my football mind was awake at that point, and he was a great player. I'm not going to sit here and say like I studied Sean Taylor when he was at Miami and could evaluate him as a prospect. I will say that compared to the guys I've been studying the draft, watching film since like the 2006 draft. That was the first class where I got all 22 ones and watching players. I would say. I mean, he's certainly up there in the conversation. I probably had a higher grade on Derwin James, when he was coming out of Florida State. But I would say it's a higher grade. It's comparable to Kyle Hamilton. I had a similar kind of grade on Nick Emanwari last year. He was extremely high on my board. I would say that's probably like the short list. I mean, Eric Berry was in that group. He's a great player and can do so many different things. And that's what will be interesting is that because he's got such a versatile skill set, everybody's going to kind of view him differently. Is he Emanwari? Is he a guy that we want to play him deep? That's going to dictate his value as well with all these different clubs.
He's Darren Woodson. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Darren Woodson should be in the Hall of Fame. But my other question, the Cowboys, without a second and third round pick, what's there? What are the Cowboys missing if they don't get a second and third? If they don't somehow get into that second and third round?
Yeah, I think that's where I really like the depth in the middle of this draft when it comes to the cornerback spot. And obviously that's where they got Siobhan Ravel in the third round last year, which I thought was outstanding value. A guy that I do think you were talking about, guys that you feel like can lock in as starters. Like from a talent standpoint, I didn't watch every snap of Revel this year, but he's a guy that I kind of earmarked when he was at ECU is that this is a guy that has long-term starting value. So it doesn't shock me to hear you guys say that could be him here in 2026. But that's a position, or that's an area of the draft where I look at it like, yeah, I like the corners that are going to be going off the board round 2, round 3.
Fran, when you look at, and this is Fran Duffy, you need to make sure you're signed up to be a diehard, because then you get the diehard draft guide, which Fran Duffy, you get his rankings, you get his scouting reports, all those different things. And also look up the All NFL Draft podcast, which is brand new. Make sure you're following all of Fran's things. When it comes to the Cowboys have right now on the roster, basically one edge. They basically have Donovan Ezeraku, and he's in the room all by himself. Do you see value at when the Cowboys have, I'm thinking their second first round pick at number 20, because if you had to guess, again, Arvell Reese, Ohio State, maybe the best player in the draft. Some may call him an edge, some may call him a linebacker. My guess is Reuben Bain and David Bailey are both gone before the Cowboys pick at 12. So when you get down to 20, who do you like the best of not the top 3 guys?
Yeah, I would say it's probably Clemson's TJ Parker at that spot. This is a guy that was viewed as a top 10 pick coming into the season. And when I did him over the summer, I was like, I don't know if I see that, guys. I'm not sure that he's quite like the elite level prospect that he was kind of being painted to be by a lot of people in the media. And then he had a down year. He only had a handful of sacks this year. Clemson obviously didn't do well. And now everyone's like, oh, he's not a first round pick. And I'm like, well, hold on. He's a good player. He's a nice player. He's just not like the elite level that I think a lot of people had projected him to be a few months back. So I think when you're looking at TJ Parker, I do think that he would be a good fit for Christian Parker's defense if he's going to be playing the same way that Vic Fangio kind of utilized, his defensive line. If you're going to play a lot of light boxes, you need those guys up front to be able to be sturdy, to be firm, and make sure that they not just account for their one guy in the run game, but also like when people talk about like gap and a half, like you have to be able to hold your own in the run game if you're going to play in this defense. And so when I look at TJ Parker, that would be a name that would make some sense there at 20.
Fran, if you're foreshadowing the draft class as a whole, who's the one guy in this draft class that you can kind of like, I'll bet my house on it, that this dude is going to be a 10-year all-pro player in the National Football League?
All-pro?
All-pro. I don't know. All-pro is tough. I think that certainly like Arvell Reese has that upside, but man, I'd be terrified. People want to compare him to Micah, and we've talked. I know we can't talk about Micah. They're talking about a guy a former pass rusher that came out of Penn State as a linebacker and made that transition. I don't know if I can get there with Reese. I think that if I'm going to try and bet on all pro, that's difficult in this class. There are certainly guys that have that ceiling. Reese being one of them. I think that Bailey could get there. David Bailey, the pass rusher from Texas Tech. The guy that I'm on an island still on this player. And I do think that if we're talking about him, honestly, Jeff, to answer your previous question, Keldrick Falk is a player from Auburn that I'm extremely high on. And I think that when you're looking at what he can be in the NFL, this is a guy that can line up inside and outside, can win from multiple techniques up front along the defensive line. He's extremely young. He's one of the youngest players in this class, doesn't turn 21 until the fall. He's been consistently disruptive and productive. He's got great character. He's got peerless medical records. To me, he's going to be extremely athletic for his size. So we're talking traits, we're talking age, we're talking character, we're talking medical, we're talking versatility. In this class where there's not a lot of people to get excited about, sign me up for Keldrick Falk. And so my guess is that he's going higher than 20. That's my personal evaluation has him much higher than that. But you're seeing a lot of mock drafts now, and a lot of people are not buying into that. So we'll see if that changes over the next few weeks.
I have seen his name very recently to the Cowboys multiple times, and he's the guy people in the chat are saying that I hate him.
You do.
No, you get to, how if you're 5 spots lower in your rankings than the consensus, you hate a guy.
Yep.
I view him as, I see all the tools that people are going to love, and I have not seen those tools result in what I think the sum of those parts should have been. And so people are going to bet on what it could be. And I do feel like, and you tell me this, probably fits here, right? If Christian Parker is going to do, much like you said with TJ Parker, if you want a guy that lines up on the edge, that can wrestle with your offensive tackle, that can play the run, and then you're hoping that he manifests the upside that you see from his movement abilities and all that into a pass rusher, probably fits if he makes it to 20.
You know, I was down on Shamar Stewart last year. Like I had him very, very low, you know, because to me, like he was not a guy that made an impact. It wasn't like disruptive or productive, right? Like, all right, there are some guys where like sacks can be weird, you know, it can fluctuate. We know how that goes. When I watch Falk, yeah, like, do I wish that there were more sacks? Sure. He had more sacks this year, I'm pretty sure, than Shamar Stewart had in his entire career with the Aggies. So to me, when I'm looking at Falk, like I wish the production was a little bit better. But man, I'm head over heels on that guy. That's a guy I'm willing to bet on.
Is Philly falling apart? Are they falling apart in Philly?
Falling apart. It's a good question.
Jeff didn't want to ask you that. Is Philly falling apart?
That's a good question.
Falling apart might be a bit strong, but obviously it has not been a great offseason here in Philadelphia in terms of just the vibes, right, and everything. Looking outside in, you know, the departure of Jeff Stoutland, the lengthy offensive coordinator search. I think they may have ended up with a good hire, and we know how this goes, right? And this happens at head coach, it happens OC, DC. Some of these hires, like, maybe you don't get your first choice, your second choice, or your third choice, but then your fourth choice that you end up offering the job to ends up being a home run hire. It's happened here in Philly. You know, Doug Peterson was not their first choice. They wanted Ben McAdoo. You know, all reports point to that. They wanted Ben McAdoo. Ben McAdoo said no, and they ended up with Doug Peterson, and Doug Peterson leads them to their first Super Bowl. So, you know, we never know how this thing is going to turn out, but I would say, like, outside looking in, no, the vibes have not been great.
This is Fran Duffy. His draft work is awesome. He has a front row seat to watching Philly fall apart. He's a man that has a lot going on. Thank you, Fran. We appreciate you.
Appreciate it, guys. We'll talk soon.